I mean, here's just one example of a man. Now you can see this. This is in the flash drive I gave you. So this is a craft that Mr. Herrera was on a Marine platoon, and this was in 2009 in Indonesia. They were on a humanitarian mission. So they go out there. I wanted to bring Mr. Herrera here, but he had a work conflict. And he and his 6 guys went off in a direction, came across in the jungle that object, this. Now, there's a black and white version. We have a color. But the point I'm making is this object, man-made, staffed with some kind of covert human operators without proper military insignia. And in the crate there, we found out from this new whistleblower, this because he was at that conference at the National Press Club in June of 2023 when Mr. Herrera disclosed this. He was threatened to be killed by all these guys who were there. And then this crate, he thought they were transporting drugs. And then this new whistleblower came up and said, no, those are human assets in there. These are people that have been taken to be trained as a psionic operator. And a psionic operator is someone who, they pump them up full of drugs. Most of them end up dying or end up in a coma. Some of them survive. And they're used to use their, what I was talking about before, consciousness and thought to latch onto the guidance systems of a non-human craft. And people say, this sounds like science fiction. Yeah, well, you know, you're not dealing with a Boeing 777. You're dealing with civilizations hundreds of thousands of years more advanced with technologies commensurate to having socially, spiritually, and technologically evolved for that long and not blown themselves up like we're about to. So those civilizations are at that point where they can have thought, consciousness, mind, technology interface as easily as you and I pick up a cell phone and talk, which would have been magic. You know, one thing I tell people, step out of this little slice of time we're in and realize if you were to go back to Thomas Jefferson and show them your smartphone and video conference someone, well, if you were in Salem, Massachusetts, you'd be burned at the stake as a witch because it would look like, you know, witchcraft. To us, it's an everyday thing. Flipping on a light switch, no one thinks about it. It'd be magic to someone 1,000 years ago. So imagine, now let's extrapolate that technology curve into the future, a few 100,000 or 1,000,000 years. What do you think you're going to have? You're not going to have what everyone's expecting. And this is the blind spot of scientists, frankly. They're always looking at right now or in the rearview mirror. And when you're encountering a civilization's non-human intelligence is this advanced, you've got to put everything you know on a shelf because we don't know anything. I mean, we're like half a step out of the jungle scientifically. But these covert engineering programs that started studying this back in the 40s and 50s, they have all this. I mean, they have figured all that part of it out. And however much you think is sitting out there in the desert, it's 100 times more. You know, Ben Rich, you remember Ben Rich? He was the director, the president of the Lockheed Skunk Works. So the week he died, he had a conversation with a colleague of mine, James Goodall. And Jim Goodall is a very renowned aerospace historian and a mainstream author. And Ben Rich and he knew each other. So he called him up. He was very close to death, had cancer. And Ben Rich says to, you know, he asks, well, you know, what do you really have out there in the desert? And Ben Rich says, anything you can imagine, anything you've seen on Star Trek or Star Wars, we have it. We've already done it. It's out there in the desert. He says, but not Area 51. And he was talking about in the underground facilities connected to this. So what that opening is connects to a place called the Ant Hill, which is to the east out in the desert further, and goes underground through a series of bases. They're known as STIFs, subterranean facilities. Some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases. And they're connected with underground tunnels. I actually have in my archive the patent for the machine that made those tunnels that are made by various contractors like Bechtel Corporation and some others that I know. So those facilities have been studying in reverse engineering ET tech, alien tech, whatever you want to call it, for 70 years. They've also had trillions of dollars that the U.S. government doesn't know has been going into that. And I will say of all the scientists I've met in the world from any academic institution, the scientists that get picked out of high school or college working on this technology, this is the Raytheon triangle, they are the brightest, most accomplished scientists, highest IQ I've ever met, period. But you're not going to see them at MIT and Harvard. Now,
why won't you? Where do they recruit them from?
They identify them sometimes in early, through IQ tests and other special abilities and talents programs. And then, once they're identified, then they get kind of pulled over in that direction. And by the way, your top special forces guys that I know, like Jake Barber, very, very, very incredibly smart guy. He was identified as a specially gifted person as a young man, and eventually got moved into the Special Forces, Delta Force, Air Force, and then emerged as a contractor, what they used to call a NOC, a non-official cover, for the intelligence community interfacing with the partners, over in the aerospace. So he was assigned to the aerospace corporations, but also as an intelligence guy, and I know what agency he was from. So that is how it's done. But he was identified as a relatively young man, as very incredibly gifted, and he is. So the best of your Green Beret, Special Forces, Navy SEAL guys are not only amazing warriors, but the top tier of them are also very bright and very accomplished. So the same thing happens with your scientists that they want to grab up.
What is this name of the place you were talking about? I want to go to the Jake Barber clip. What is the name of the place, the Anthill Lockheed, that picture that you showed? What's the name of it if Rob wanted to just search for it?
Well, this is the, I think the Howland, it's just the Lockheed Skunk Works test range.
Lockheed Skunk Works?
Skunk Works. Lockheed Skunk Works. So it's an RCS range. It's a range where they test. And I have some other images we can give you where you'll see there's what looks like a runway, right? You got a runway back here at this jetport. Mm-hmm. It's not a runway. You look at, there are diamonds on what looks like a runway. That's where the man-made anti-gravity craft that Lockheed makes come up out of the ground, hover over the diamond, and then they're struck with certain directional energy weapons to see how sturdy they are and how stable they are. And most of them are hardened enough, but occasionally one goes down.
Is that what you're talking about right there?
Correct. So you see those diamonds. That is not a runway. So they come up and they float over those diamonds at various distances. And so that's where you test these objects. And they're electrogravitic, meaning they're not conventional propulsion systems. So there's no rockets, there's no jets, et cetera. I will give you the date when we mastered gravity control. It was October 1954, so I wasn't born yet. So in the elite engineering and contracting world, these have been in various stages of development in 40s and 50s, but they mastered, let's call the gyro. So that, it's some of the early UFO film footage you see, it looks like the thing is like a leaf falling. Mm-hmm. It's because that was a man-made one that wasn't stable, wasn't alien. But once they mastered gravity control, then they became stable. And by the late 1950s, early 60s, they started being used in special projects, illegal special projects, which is why Eisenhower lost control of this whole enterprise. Eisenhower was the one that got deceived, and then ultimately, on his farewell address, Eisenhower said, "Beware the military-industrial complex." He was talking mostly about this kind of operation that he couldn't talk about publicly. Jack Kennedy was going to get to the bottom of this. He fired Allen Dulles, CIA, one of the founders, and he also subsequently got assassinated. Now, whether the files that President Trump's going to release have this in it, I know, and I have people who in another country have documents to establish this, that Jack Kennedy was killed because he was going after this issue to get it back under control, the UAP issue. So, and I pretty am certain that Robert Kennedy was killed for the same reason.
You think he was killed for this reason?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I have a document. It's an interesting letter that it's in our archive. not in here, it's in our archive, from Bobby Kennedy, Sr., when he was running for president in 68, and it was like about 30 days before they killed him. And it's a letter. It's kind of funny. It's archaically written. Well, it's the 60s, right? And it says, I'm paraphrasing here, but I can get you a copy of it. He says, I'm a card-carrying member of the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Association of America. This is Bobby Kennedy writing this. And I'm very eager to do this. This is very important. He really wanted to get to the bottom of it because he knew that his brother, or JFK, President Kennedy, had been killed trying to get to the bottom of this and was also planning to really clean house at the CIA. So Bobby Kennedy writes this. 30 days later, he's dead. And not long ago, I've provided that to his family, to his Bobby Kennedy's family. And actually, they had never seen this letter. I said, well, they say, how do you have it? Well, I said, it's what I have. I have this vast archive. And it's authentic. And so this goes back a long time. A lot of American history that people think they know, they don't. Whether any of that comes out, I'm sort of skeptical, actually. I'm not even sure that the files that they have
again,
are going to have all this in it.
I'm curious what we're going to learn about that we don't know about right now under this administration.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm on Manect. If you'd like to ask me questions or learn more about the UFO UAP issue, contact me there, and we can unpack whatever you want to know about the disclosure efforts, about covert technologies, and what's going to be coming up in the next year or so as we go forward in a large disclosure on the extraterrestrial and UFO issue.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.